Hello, and welcome to Sex Talk for Self-Advocates, webinar number 6. My name is Annika Stallis, and I'm the Resource and Dissemination Manager here at AUCD. I'd like to thank you all for joining us today. Before we begin, I'd like to address a few logistical details. First, we'll provide a brief introduction of our speakers. Following the speaker's presentation, there'll be time for questions. Because of the number of participants, your audio lines will be muted throughout the call. However, you can submit questions at any point during the presentation via the chat box on your webinar console. You may send the chat to the whole audience or to the presenters only. We will compile your questions throughout the webinar and address them at the end. Please note that we may not be able to address every question and may combine some questions. This entire webinar is being recorded and will be available on AUCD's website following the event. There will also be a short 5-question evaluation survey at the close of the webinar. We invite you to provide feedback on the webinar and also to provide suggestions for future topics. Please join me in welcoming Julie Atkinson, co-chair of AUCD's Sexual Health Special Interest Group. Julie?
Thank you, Anna. As Anna said, I am the co-chair for the AUCD's Sexual Health Special Interest Group, and one of our goals is to connect individuals and researchers, professionals with information and resources. This Self-Talk for Self-Advocate series has been going on for the past year and a half, and it's been a great series. We collected questions from individuals about relationships and sexuality and have turned that into a fantastic educational opportunity. This is our 6th webinar, and we are looking forward to our conversation today as we discuss LGBTQ+ relationships. And I'm excited to introduce our panel of speakers and educators. And then today it's a little bit different. We've invited, our sex educators have invited individuals to come in and speak about their experience and answer the questions that have been submitted. So our first panelist is Max Barrows. Max is the Outreach Director for Green Mountain Self-Advocates, and he's been in that position since 2007. He mentors youth and adults with developmental disabilities to speak up for themselves. Green Mountain is the lead partner for the Self-Advocacy Resource Technical Assistance Center, SARTAC. Their team assists local and state-level advocacy organizations across the nation. In his work, he advances the message that when you meet an individual with a disability, presume competence. And Max has invited a few people, and you guys will get to meet who Max has invited today. Next is Catherine McLaughlin, and she's a national expert and trains individuals, staff, and parents on sexuality and developmental disabilities. She teaches sexuality education to people with intellectual and developmental disabilities and trains them to become peer sexuality educators themselves. She is the author of an agency and a school curriculum entitled Sexuality Education for People with Developmental Disabilities, and has developed 2 online courses, one to train professionals entitled Developmental Disabilities and Sexuality 101, and one for parents, Talking to Your Kids, Developmental Disabilities and Sexuality. And you can contact Catherine at her at the email on the screen at elevatoustraining.com. And Catherine, again, the folks that she's invited will get introduced in just a few minutes. And then Erica Thomas is our last sexuality educator, and she is the Education and Outreach Specialist at RCM of Washington in Washington, D.C. She's previously was at the Georgetown UCED here in our network, and so we are excited that she is still with us. At RCM, she facilitates Direct Support Professionals Academy, where she mentors future DSPs. She continues to deliver one-on-one health education coaching sessions with people with intellectual and/or developmental disabilities on an array of wellness topics. Erica develops and implements healthcare information curriculum and education sessions, including sexuality and intimacy, healthy relationships, and community safety for people with disabilities and their support teams. When she's not advocating for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, she enjoys traveling the world and spending time with her new baby boy. So before we get to our speakers and to the topic itself, just a few housekeeping items. Throughout the webinar today and throughout the series, we've tried to really make sure that we're using person-first language. And as we are reading questions that come from participants, that we're using their own words the way that the questions were written. And also trying to make sure that we're using medically accurate terminology. Certainly there are other ways that to address all of these, but this is the way that we have structured it for the series. I also want to note that certainly relationships and sexuality are very personal topics. And as you're watching the webinar today, if anything comes up and it evokes previous memories of maybe something bad that has happened, certainly you're not alone, and I would definitely encourage you to reach out. A number that you can call is the Crisis Care Center, and the number is on the screen right now, and Tanisha is also going to add it into the chat box so that everyone will be able to see that. So later on, if you need to access this number, it'll be in the chat box. And you know, there are people there who you can talk to and will help you. How to use the chat box. At the very bottom of your screen, you're going to see that little bubble with the 3 dots. And you're going to want to click on that, and it will open up the chat box. And there you'll be able to see questions or comments from participants. If you have a question as we're going throughout, we'll do question and answer at the very end of the webinar today. You can add those questions to the chat box right now, or as we go throughout the webinar. If you would like to send a private message where it doesn't go to everyone, if you have a question and you would prefer to remain anonymous, you can send that directly to Tanisha Clark. She is manning our chat box, and so you can send it directly to her. So when we get to Q&A, she can just say that this was a question that was submitted, and it wouldn't be tied to anyone to maintain your anonymity. And she just put that first one in the chat box, so that's how you could just click on Tanisha's name, and that's how you can send a private message to her. So how this webinar is going to work. I'm going to turn it over to our educators in just this next minute, and they'll go through introductions with our guest speakers, and then we'll go through about the next hour talking about these different topics and questions that have been submitted. And at the very end, we will reserve about 15 minutes to do question and answer and talk about resources and things like that. With that, I should just one last slide. This, as I mentioned, is an ongoing webinar series. So 5 other webinars have already occurred on a variety of topics: relationships, sex and intimacy, sexually transmitted infections, just relationship experiences, and birth control. And these have all been recorded, and if you would like to go back and watch them, you can use these links. Again, Tanisha will add these links into the chat box, so you can just click on it. And if you want to access any of these previously recorded webinars that we've done. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I'm going to turn it over to Catherine McLaughlin, who will get us started with our panel.
Great. Thank you, Julie. I wanted to say that there are many people who are LGBTQ that talk about how they feel invisible during sexuality education classes. And although we've threaded this topic throughout the last 4 or 5, we wanted to do one just on this topic so people could really learn about this community and not feel invisible as well. So we have 5 panelists who have disabilities and identify in some way with this community and this population. So we're going to have each of them introduce themselves first. Raisin, do you mind starting? And this is just your name, where you live, your preferred pronoun, and how you identify. And any of these things you can leave out. You don't have to answer any of this, but so name, where you live, your preferred pronoun, and how you identify.
Okay, so my name is Raisin Kane. I'm from Arlington, Virginia. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. Although people have used they with me, and that's fine. It kind of makes sense. I identify as queer. I'm also autistic. I use identity first language when I talk about autism in reference to myself. And that's it.
Great. Thanks, Raisin. So glad you're
welcome.
here.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Great. I think Angel's on now. Angel. You have to unmute.
There we go. Hi.
Yes.
Yes, I am on now.
You are on.
My name's Angel Urban.
A little louder.
My name's Angel Urban. Hold on a second. Hold on one moment.
Okay.
Technical difficulty.
Do you want us to come back to you? Oh, no, she's still there. Okay. Angel, why don't I have other people introduce themselves while you get situated? Okay. All right.
Sorry
Paul.
about that.
Oh,
Can you hear me at all?
yep. Talk really loud though.
All right. So my name is Angel Urban, and my preferred pronouns are hers, she, her, and hers.
Where do you live?
Oh, I'm in Lansing, Michigan.
Mhm. And how do you identify? As far
I
as,
identify as female.
I heard female and that was it.
Yeah, female.
Okay. And anything with LGB?
Yeah, I identify as pansexual.
Okay. Great. We'll talk about that too. All right. So how about Andy? Can you introduce yourself? I see you. Okay.
I'm unmuted. Hi everyone, how is everybody? My name is Andy and I'm from DC now, but I'm in LA where my home is. I am a gay male and my pronouns are him, and he.
Great. Thank you. Glad
You're
you're
welcome.
here. Well, and then Thomas, and then we'll hear from Pauline. Thomas.
Hi, it's Erica. Thomas has some difficulties getting here, so he's not going to be able to make it.
Okay. Thanks, Erica. Okay, Pauline, I know you're on because I heard your voice earlier. Can you introduce yourself?
Here, hi, this is I'm Pauline, and I identify as female. I am transgender, and I live in the wonderful state of Massachusetts. And I am the director and the founder of the Rainbow Support Group for people with disability in Massachusetts.
Great. And your preferred pronoun?
She.
Okay, great. Thank you all. So we're going to talk a little bit about some definitions, but also the panel can jump in on any of this as well. But if you could show Julie the gender unicorn, you may be familiar with this. But this, just to give you some definitions, and then people can talk more about the definitions. But there's a man from Vermont, his name is Thomas, not the Thomas that couldn't attend, but he's done some great work around these definitions, and I believe we're gonna get these definitions that he's come up with to you. He has a disability and is a gay man. So the first thing is gender identity, which is really how somebody feels inside. And they might feel like they're a male or a man or female or a woman or a combination of the two or neither as well. And so we're hearing more from people about how they identify. And that's part of the preferred pronouns because it helps people understand how we people want to be referred to. So, and we'll talk more about these things. So that's gender identity, and you see that on the unicorn. So it's this unicorn is thinking this, right? How do I feel? And this starts for people at age 3 or 4, really feeling their gender identity. Then gender expression, I really liked what Thomas came up with for gender expression. And he said, have you thought about getting a new haircut? Do you like to go shopping for clothes? People express themselves in different ways. There's a saying, don't judge a book by its cover. Try not to guess a person's gender or pronoun from the way they look. And you can see the unicorn, the dotted green, that's, you know, the unicorn's haircut, what the unicorn is wearing. It's how you express yourself and your gender. So it's kind of the look, the hair, the way you act, all of those things is expression. And then you see sex assigned at birth, which is the biology. So that's the sexual parts, right? And in our culture, we look at the sexual parts and then we assign gender. And really, we don't know if that's going to match up all the time. And so some people are suggesting that we wait until people are 3 or 4 and say what their gender identity is and not assign a gender to them when we don't really know. So that's the biology. We use biology to talk about gender, but really it's more about how a person feels inside than what their body parts are. So that's gender identity, biology, expression, and then sexual orientation. We get these terms confused sometimes. We think that if, say, a man carries a purse, we think he's gay, but really we don't know if he's gay. But what he's doing is he's expressing his gender in a way that we may not think of for males in our culture. Maybe in other countries, males carry purses all the time and no one thinks anything, but we get them confused. But really, gender identity is who the person is, and sexual orientation is who the person's attracted to. Who do they like, love, and lust? All right, so we've got a couple of questions, and I'd love the panel to jump in now. So this was a quote that someone put on the survey when we asked questions, and it said, it's important that we have a chance to hear from self-advocates and GLBTQA disabled people who are also experts instead of only workers and university staff. Absolutely, so people with lived experience. So to the panel, why do you think it's important to hear from self-advocates who identify as LGBTQIA+? Anybody want to start? Or I could ask you to start. Andy, you going? Great, thank you.
Oh, so I think it's really important for people, and I'm sorry, this is Andy, if people can't see me, I should announce myself, for people with disabilities to always be at the table, regardless of what their sexual identity or orientation is. When we speak about ourselves, especially as something so intimate as orientation and sexuality, when we're being spoken to by people who may not identify as lesbian, gay, transgender, or on any kind of spectrum, it's really devaluing, I think. I heard a speaker very early on in my advocacy career where she was talking about how she did all this work in the LGBTQ community. And I was just starting my community groups on people with disabilities and LGBTQ. And I was so excited about meeting another lesbian disability person because the way she was speaking, she was talking like it was her lived experience. And she was like, no, I'm a straight woman. And I was like very hurt by that because she was doing the work and like she wasn't claiming to be an ally. She was sort of saying, I'm the expert in this life, in all these topics. And she wasn't even LGBTQ. And it was also it was just alarming to see that that was the norm, and everybody looked at this person as the expert, and me as an LGBTQ person who lived the struggle and who lived, you know, the coming out experience, felt it really devaluing for myself and the audience to hear that. And yeah, it still happens today, I think.
Mm-hmm. Great. Thank you, Andy. Anyone else want to jump in and talk about why it's important to hear from people from this community? Raisin, Angel.
Yeah, I will.
Yeah, thanks.
All right, so I just think it's always important for us to see ourselves positively represented. And I think there shouldn't be anything about us, excuse me, without us. When people like us see representation, see themselves in other people, they're reminded that they're not alone, and they get to see that people can have happy, healthy lives, especially if they're living somewhere where they're feeling really isolated and they don't see other people like them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Great, thank you.
I think for me, I've
Angel?
tried, yeah,
Yep.
this is Angel.
Thank you.
For me, I try to think about what it was like when I didn't know what my sexuality was, or how I was going to be portrayed, or what people were going to think. So to know that there is this intersectionality is really valuable.
Can you say a little more the intersectionality piece? What do you mean?
Just being disabled and a member of the LGBTQ community. So
Gotcha.
as,
Yep.
as well as being an African American and a woman,
Yeah.
you know, fitting into more than one minority group.
Right, and what's that? Yeah, and what's that experience like? Yeah, yeah, great, thank you. I think I'm going to pass it over to Erica now. She's going to talk a little bit more about terms and ask some other questions to the panel as well.
Thank you, Catherine. Julie, if we could get the vocabulary, please. All right, so I'm gonna go over a few of the words that are in the LGBTQ vocabulary. And I believe in the resource section at the end that there are others that can be looked at as well. So when you get a minute, you can check those out. So we'll go through these that are listed here. But just before we get into the vocabulary, I just want to make sure that everyone knows and understands that it's very important that we remember to respect the words that people use to describe themselves. People who identify as LGBTQ, they'll use many different terms to describe themselves and their experiences. And not all of the terms fit all of the people. So again, these letters that are listed here, these might not fit for everyone, and that's fine. So I want to make sure that everyone knows that it's important to ask people what language they want you to use. So when we asked earlier what pronoun that you would like for us to use, and it's okay to ask someone for their preferred name and pronouns, even if the name and pronoun does not fit what you see on the outside. And then in some cases, you might have known a person for a long time as a person, and then when that person, you know, might want to be someone else or change or be on another letter here that's listed on our vocabulary, and that's fine. So you should respect that person at all times and always, again, refer to the person with the appropriate pronouns that the person chooses. And sometimes people aren't sure which identity label fits them, and that's okay too. And then you want to give people time and space to figure it out for themselves. So you're not trying to figure this out for the person. Let the person figure it out for themselves. And then the terms and the language can change over time, and that's perfectly normal, and that's perfectly okay. So with the vocabulary words that we have listed here, we have L, which is lesbian, and so that's a woman who is primarily attracted to women. We have gay, who is a man who is primarily attracted to other men, and then sometimes gay can be a word that is used just overall for someone who is attracted to the same sex. Bisexual is when a person is attracted to people of their own sex and of the opposite gender. Transgender is a person whose gender identity differs from what their gender was assigned at birth. So when Catherine was talking about how when you're born, how your genitalia is looked at, and then it's determined whether you're male or female. Transsexual is a word that we do not use anymore, but it is the same as a transgender person. Queer is a person, it's an umbrella term, so it's inclusive of the many identities and variations that make up the LGBTQ plus community. Questioning is someone who is questioning their sexual orientation or gender identity or gender expression. Intersex is a person whose sexual anatomy or chromosomes do not fit with the traditional markers of female or male. An ally is a non-queer person who supports and advocates for the queer community. An individual within the LGBTQ community can be an ally as well. Asexual is a person who does not feel sexual desire or attraction to any group of people. It's not the same of celibacy, and asexual has many subgroups. And then a pansexual is a person who experiences sexual, romantic, physical, or physical attraction to members of all gender identities, expressions, and not just people who fit into the standard status quo. So with that being said, and going over the vocabulary, a quote was shared within our community when we were gathering questions and all, and someone said there should be more stuff on LGBTQIA stuff. So I would like my first question to ask the panelists is there enough information out there on LGBTQ plus relationships and disability?
Usually intersectionality wise, I find not as much. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. So as far as the intersectionality between disability and sexuality, I find there's not a lot of information on being both and sometimes being all. You know, so sometimes I remember when I first discovered my sexuality, I was feeling very alone because it was like, do I really need to add one more thing to a already very complicated life with me being disabled, Black, a woman? Like, do I really need to add another minority to this mix? But realizing it's not a choice, and even for disabilities, it's not a choice. Like, even if because sometimes people get say, you could say it's not a choice if you're able-bodied, but then you get those comments like, you're already disabled. Do you really have to be gay too? That's like, I get a lot of comments like, you're already disabled. Do you really have to be LGBT too? It's like, yes, I do.
Andy?
So I have a very similar sort of experience to Angel. It was very difficult to accept my LGBTQ and disability. And it was only when I accepted it wholeheartedly, like, this is the person you're meant to be. Because I had to wrap that around my spirituality, the fact that I'm a Christian. And so that I held high. And in both communities, being disabled and being gay was very like, oh, you need to be healed from both those things because that's not what God wants for you. And I was like, but this is how God made me. Like, this is what I know to be true in my heart and who I am. And I mean, I always joke with my friends and I say, well, I have gay face, and it's a joke within my gay male friends, like, and I'm like, well, if that's the truth, then this is who I am and I'm going to live in my truth. But I think as far as resources, there's not enough. When we talk about intersectionality, we usually tend to pick the one thing, right? If we're going to be intersectional, we're going to talk about disability. If we're going to be intersectional, we're going to talk about being LGBTQ. If we're going to be intersectional, we're going to talk about people of color. I happen to be all those things. And so I always feel sort of left out, right? Or I have to choose which person do I need to highlight the most, because how are people going to hear me, right? If I'm talking to predominantly individuals of faith or color, then I choose. If I'm talking to a mainly LGBTQ audience, I focus on that. I've never really felt, in my experience, a full acknowledgement of my whole self. When I do public speaking or even in an audience, I always have to compartmentalize. And I think for the future of this work, I think we really have to look at accepting somebody in all their facets and not just picking the pieces that we want to hear from them, because it really makes it sort of a mind, like, it tweaks with the mind a little bit, especially me emotionally, when I have to pick so many different pieces of myself depending on who I'm addressing. So yeah, that's sort of my experience.
Pauline, did you have anything that you wanted to add about resources? And if there is enough information out there on LGBTQ relationships and disability?
I would like to add that in my time that I've been doing, for longer that I've been doing this and everything like that, I've had to come up with my own resources and come up with, things to help me and everything like that, because, it's not easy, because not everybody wants to talk about it. Not everybody wants to understand it, but yet I turn around and I say, well, it's needed. And only because of me here in Massachusetts, I'm getting the Department of Developmental Service here in Massachusetts. They're the ones that are funding me to go out and do trainings and go out and do this, because they're saying, like, hey, somebody needs to go out and talk about this. So that's, so I'm creating the stuff here in Massachusetts as I'm going along, and it hasn't been easy. So
thank you, Pauline. Raisin, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I would just add that it's important to have things like this where we can be visible, because I think for a lot of people, it's not even within the realm of possibilities for them that people with disabilities want romantic relationships or are in romantic relationships or are sexual people. And until people start realizing that is very much the case, we're not going to be on their radar enough unless we elbow our way in. So I appreciate just being able to do that here.
Thank you. So correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm hearing as far as like resources and information, there's not a lot out there. And if there are resources, I'm hearing from Pauline that she's the person who's developing resources and she's talking to people. I know Andy here in DC, he's going out and he's spreading the word to everyone too. For the resources that may be available, do you all have any idea of how to access them, or are there any resources that you all want to briefly tell us about that are available?
Well, this is Pauline. For me, the biggest resource that I came across of was the resource of GLAD, which is out of Boston and everything like that. I mean, they don't have anything for people with disability, but they do have a wide variety of material that I have used, or I have helped, or I have used for my groups or whatever like that. So, but other than that, I mean, I don't think there's too many resources. So
I'll go briefly. So like many on the call, I feel like I've had to develop and sort of archive my own resources. I've started several community groups and advocacy groups with both seniors and people with disabilities around LGBTQ and disability. And there is a need out there because when I had these community groups, we would start with 5 and they would end up being 30, right? And I feel like I always went to the Gay and Lesbian Center as the hub, and they would always go like, "Oh my gosh, this is so innovative, this is so amazing," and I'd be like, "No, it's not. These are people who have been here, and you're just like, because I'm forcing my way through, you're allowing us to be at this table." So I think the gay LGBTQIA community needs to recognize us as part of their community, right? I think that they I'm sorry, LGBTQ brothers and sisters, but sometimes they can be the most segregating community because we don't fit into their visual norm, I guess. And I've had these discussions with directors of centers and media individuals and even GLAAD, where they're like, yeah, there's a lot of unconscious bias and, even a little bit of racism and different things, and ableism definitely is prevalent in that community. So I push them a lot to recognize us and the need that we need a space for us in their community.
Thank you, Andy. Did anyone else raise an Angel? Anyone want to add? Okay. And then my last question is, what resources do you want to see? So in a perfect world, what would you want to see?
Well, I think for me, I'm glad to see that there's more media representation of people with disabilities in the media. And we do have some representation of people with disabilities that are a part of the LGBT community. Netflix just created a television show called Special that is about a gay man who has cerebral palsy. So media representation is important though, because a lot of people watch TV and they watch YouTube and they watch the media and they listen to the radio. And I know for a long time I didn't find anyone that had a disability on TV ever. And when I did, it was like a really wild thing, you know. But I think that's changing. I think the other thing I would like to see is just people acknowledging that people with disabilities are sexual beings and have a sexuality and can and want and need the same things as everybody else. I don't think we hear that message growing up, in schools. I think we need to start teaching kids young that classmate of yours is just like everybody else. But because when I was growing up, we were friends, but no, as you're growing up and you're becoming a teenager, you don't see a lot of people wanting to start relationships or saying that you're cute. They look at the chair and they're like, well, I can't be with her. Or they look at certain aspects of your disability and be like, well, they can't want a relationship anyway. It doesn't matter. So I would like to see resources just kind of more actively talking to preteens and early teenagers about sexuality and equality and making sure that they know that their disabled classmates are not that different from them.
Anyone else? What resources would you like to see?
This is Pauline. Go ahead, go Andy.
No, I wanted you to go. I didn't feel like I'm talking too much, so you go ahead.
Oh, I'll go. One of the ideas that I think should be happening is that there should be more interest on the internet, more information building up, because Um, I think the internet is really a key part. And I know most people with disabilities don't know how to use the internet, but we're learning gradually. And I just think if we can have more websites or more information on the internet, it would help a lot.
So just to say that I agree with everything that's been said previously, and I really do think media is the key, and marketing and just advertising for LGBTQ disability at the same time within that community. Many of you know that I'm an actor as well, and I was acting in Los Angeles for years before I decided to work in policy in DC. And one of the reasons I took the job so easily is because casting directors were telling me to be less gay or telling me to be more disabled. They didn't want to see all of this at one time. And yeah, my friend Ryan got his series on special, but even him and I were having this conversation, and he said it's a very white show, right? It's a very, my experience, very social safety net, very like privileged view of disability and LGBTQ. My experience with that was not that nice, right? It was hard for me to date. It's hard for me to date now. I've been in relationships, thank goodness, that have been fostering and loving and caring, but you know, you think of the swipe right sort of mentality, and you're always debating, am I going to tell this person I have a disability? Am I going to put it on my profile? Am I not? You know, and it's very, again, it chips away at the self-esteem a little bit, and you really have to have sort of a thick skin to deal with that level of rejection is the only way I can think about it, because people that aren't disabled have trouble recognizing that people with disabilities are sexual individuals, are able to have relationships and meaningful connections. And so I think media is the only key. And I think when you talk about media, you also have to talk about the intersectionality of different cultures and different experiences while you're talking about disability and LGBTQ.
So
All right,
I
go ahead, Max. Let's go ahead and
I don't know why there was a silence there. I guess there was a miscue, but I am next. So my question
Can you all hear
here's
me?
another. Say that again. Did somebody say something?
That connection might be a little off. So Max, go and take it away.
All right, cool. So here is another question from Self Advocates, and they asked, how do you know you are LGBTQ? And now before you answer, panelists, I want to share a few thoughts I came up with along with a good colleague of mine who also identifies as LGBTQ plus. And if you are having sexual thoughts or feelings, do not be ashamed. Do not keep them inside. Find a healthy way to let those feelings out and talk about them. For some, it may be hard to come out as something different. You may feel alone. It may be hard to understand and talk about your sexual feelings. Discovering you are LGBTQ sounds similar to when I discovered that I had autism. In both situations, I would recommend taking the time to consider who you are comfortable talking to. So when coming out or questioning your sexual orientation, it helps to think about who are the people you trust the most. If you are feeling confused about your sexuality, feel open to talk with someone you trust. Keeping feelings inside and not talking about them can be hard. Finding people I could feel open and safe talking about autism was so liberating. Having other people accept me as a person with autism made me feel so much more secure and comfortable with myself. Okay, back to the question asked by self-advocates. How do you know you are LGBTQ? And I'm going to start out with this question to Pauline.
How did I know? I knew at the age of 5 or 6 years old there was something different about me, because I did not feel right wearing boys' clothes. I grew up in a very small country town, very small, and I never felt comfortable and everything like that. It wasn't until probably about when I was about 10 years old, I tried on one of my sister's bathing suits, and that's how I found out that I was trans. I didn't know what the word was. I didn't find out what the word was until I watched Phil Donahue, when Phil Donahue had on the first transgender person on television. That's how I found that out, and it was very interesting, because I just said, "Oh, that's the way I feel," and that's when I figured it out. So
Cool. How about Angel? Okay, I guess.
Yeah, I'm
Oh.
sorry about that. I was
No, you're
having some
good.
technical difficulties, so I
We all
wasn't
do.
able to hear.
So the
Hold
question
on a
is,
moment.
sorry, okay.
I have to. Hold on.
Okay, you want me to come back to you, Angel?
I'll come back to me.
All right, cool. All right, so let's move on to Raisin.
Okay. It took me a while to figure it out. I started dating in college. I was dating guys, but something was missing, and I didn't really know what that was until I just thought, I was like, oh, this is not the right guy for me, until I met the first girl that I had a crush on. And then it all made sense. I didn't date that girl, but I knew I was interested in her, like too interested, not too interested, but just interested in a way that it wasn't just about friendship. And that's how I figured it out. And from that point forward, a lot more things started making sense. I didn't fight it. I told my parents within 2 months, and the rest is history.
Nice. How about Andy? Is Andy still on?
He's on mute.
He is.
You're on mute,
I think he's
Andy.
muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, great. Sorry about that. It was my fingers weren't helping me today. All right, so I'm going to be a little real with everyone, because I know this is a national webinar, and I want people to get as much of us as possible. It took me a while to realize that I was really gay. I experienced, like many people with disabilities and many in the LGBTQ community, I experienced sexual abuse when I was younger in the foster care system. And so I was very confused on whether or not I was really gay or not. And that, I feel like a lot of people go through something like that in their lives. They may not even be in the LGBTQ arena, but I do want to draw attention to the going through something like that and being LGBTQ is completely separate and different. And it took me a minute to really realize I felt these real feelings at like 4 or 5, but then the incidents happened and I put them on pause because I didn't think they were real. And about the age of 14, I started to feel like, no, this is who I really am. It's okay. And it has nothing to do with the previous experience. So it did take me a minute to be okay with dating men and being intimate with men because of those previous experiences. And I just wanted to share that, not for myself, but because I do know that that happens in these communities. And I think that, the more we share these stories, the more important it is.
I can tell you, Andy, that I got a similar experience, as I still today get a lot of questions from people that know about my history of abuse. They get a lot of questions about, are you sure you're really LGBTQ? And it's like, stop asking me that. It almost makes me angry. Like, you get a little mad because people are just like, you're discounting this part of my life. And there's a complete difference between the two.
Right. And I think that a lot of people, it's hard for them to reconcile it within themselves. And then when people start questioning it as legitimacy, because that happened to me when I was in foster care, they're like, oh no, it's only because of what happened to you that you feel that way, and they're not real feelings. And so I completely agree, and thanks to you for sharing that as well.
Thank you both. Angel, did you have anything else to share? Because I know I skipped over you because you had some technical difficulties besides what you just said.
Well, I think when I was coming out, I grew up in a household that both told me that being gay was wrong, but I also grew up in a household that really diminished me as a person for having a disability. So when I figured out, because I didn't come out till I was 22, and I was really angry at myself for a long time for being gay, until I remembered it's not a choice any more than having CP is a choice. I have CP, that's not a choice. I'm also LGBT, also not a choice. And then you also have a tendency to, when you're coming out, did diminish part of it. So like, I didn't want to come out as pansexual. I just was like, I'll just be gay, it's fine. And that's better than being weird and pansexual, right? People don't understand that. So for a while, I just discounted all parts of my sexuality because it took me a minute to figure out what was happening, and then to have other people questioning it all the time, as well as being discounted because I have a disability. It was a lot. So I think we almost need like a It Gets Better campaign for intersectionality between disability and LGBTQ.
All right. Thank you so much for sharing that. And thank you all for sharing your answers. All righty. Turning it over to, I think, Catherine. I think you're next with the next question.
Yeah. And just to say, when Angel said It Gets Better campaign, or people, it's like YouTube, right? People are telling their stories around coming out and being gay, and to have it more focused on disability and LGBTQ. Your own campaign, I think, is a great idea. So the question was, what do people need to know to support people who are LGBTQ plus in or desire relationships? So maybe it's another self-advocate or someone with a disability or a staff person, or what support is needed when someone says, I want to be in a relationship and it might be a gay relationship, or I want to transition from female to male. How can allies be supportive and others be supportive? Raisin, you want to go first?
Sure. I would just say, just be encouraging, be supportive, listen. Don't try to convince somebody that they're not who they say they are. Take them at their word. And I would just say, you know, whether you're LGBTQ plus or not, I think it's always good for us to encourage healthy relationships and healthy friendships above everything else. So I also think it's helpful for people who are new to dating and venturing into that, who don't have somebody to talk to. You know, it's good for people to share scripts of what to say if they're on a date and they no longer want to be on that date, or they're in a position where they have to negotiate their way out of something that they don't like. I think it can happen where, you know, if you're in a family where it's not acceptable to be LGBTQ, you can't ask your mom or dad or some other, you know, family member, you know, what happens if this date goes left? What do I say? Because they don't want to have the conversation with you. So I think just being a resource in that way or a friend in that way is also helpful.
I think it's also important to nurture the fact that everybody wants a relationship, because I noticed even without being LGBT, a disabled person mentions a relationship, and a lot of able-bodied people, staff and teachers and whatnot go, no, that's not we don't talk about that. No, we do talk about it, and we need to talk about it appropriately. So by just telling them not to talk about it, it doesn't help anything. It makes them feel like they're not allowed to have a relationship. I can't tell you how many, as a peer mentor, I talk to a lot of people that say, oh, I'm not allowed to have a relationship, or I'm not allowed to do this. And it's like, you know, that false sense of complacency ruins just more than just one aspect of your relationship. There's a difference between like behavior modification and just shutting someone up. And so I think it's important, particularly for the autism community, because, you know, they got so many people telling them what's appropriate, what's not appropriate. They need to know that it is appropriate to have these feelings. It is normal. You're not being autistic by having sexual feelings. You're just a human. And so I find that that's the biggest thing, is for anybody, whether LGBT or not, the disability community needs to know that it's okay to want a relationship or to not.
Great. Andy, did you want to say something? And the other piece of this question people asked was, in particular, starting a support group is something that you think is helpful? Or...
So, I mean, I think it takes one person, right? One person that you can be yourself with, or your authentic self when you're starting that journey. I know for myself, I couldn't talk about being gay to anyone except one person. And that's sort of why I started, when I was advocating, I started a LGBTQ center in Los Angeles, Orange County, and now in DC. I run these groups because we are, by community standards, I still feel invisible, right? Like, it's very hard to be seen in the LGBTQ community, even when you're going out in public, right? People always placate and pat you on the head and say, gosh, you're so brave for being out in a bar, or you're so brave for doing this, or you're so brave for dating or being on these apps. And I've been out for a very long time. I've been out for over 10 years, and I still deal with this on a daily basis. So I think having the community, having friends that see all of who you are, regardless of who you choose to be or identify as, that is so important. because I still don't talk to my family about LGBTQ issues. I feel like if they're not going to be supportive or be thoughtful or be like awake around them, they don't deserve to know those parts of me. So that's a personal choice. So again, wrapping that around to it just takes one person, and from that one person, grow your tribe.
Great. Thank you. Pauline.
Yep. Can you hear me?
Yes.
So, I think, you know, the important thing from what I've learned over the 15 years I've been doing this and everything like that is that you got to have good people, but you also got to be able to train them to teach them the difference between a person with a disability and a person that's LGBT. Because when you one of the words that I've always used in my training is that I've always used, yes, I was born with a disability, and I'm LGBT community, but I have a double whammy. I have two things that society's already going against me, and I use that as my platform. I'm saying like, yes, I have a disability. I'm LGBT. I'm transgender. I'm proud of it, and I'm also educating people in the difference between a person with a disability and a person that are LGBT. Because if you take a person with a disability and you say to that person, can you empty that trash can? Yes, I can. You show them how to do something, because they're going to say, oh my God, thank you, I can do something. You know, and it's the same thing with when I do my speaking engagement, is that I just say like, look, just be honest and truthful, and just like, I had this one guy, I'll tell this really quick story. I had this one guy that was part of a group. He came up to me and he said, what does it mean when I like somebody like me? And I said, you mean like another man? He goes, yes. I go, that means you're gay. He said, thank you. I said, why? He said none of his staff or his support people would answer that question, because they were afraid that the Department of Developmental Service was going to say, you influence on him saying that word gay. You influence on him on saying he's trans, she's a lesbian, he's gay. And that is the biggest issue that I'm dealing with here in Massachusetts, is that staff people and agencies are afraid that they're going to get in trouble because they influence that person to say those words, LGBT. And that is the biggest issue that I'm trying to overcome right now. So.
Thank you, Pauline. And Pauline shared with me earlier that the Rainbow Support Group that she runs just celebrated 15 years in Massachusetts.
Yep.
Yeah, so I think it's now Max, back to you.
It sure is. Thank you, Catherine. So, panelists, could you please share your personal experience or story about identity? And I will start with you, Pauline.
My personal story of identity is that it's been a long road to figure out who I am on the inside and the outside. Because the one thing that I've learned is that being transgendered is a mental condition. You got to get your mind ready for little changes that might happen, everything like that. From, if you're male to female like I am, you got to get used to those little changes of saying like, how do you walk in heels? How do you put on makeup? How do you, those little changes that's going to make you feel better. But it takes a long time, and it's taken me almost 30 years of my life of figuring out who I am and where to go and what to do and everything like that. And it hasn't been easy. I've had people come up to me and say, you shouldn't be doing that. You shouldn't be allowed to walk out the house like that or something like that. So, but I've overcome it because I say, I don't care. After my mother died, like 10 years ago or whatever, the rest of my family disowned me. So I have no brothers, no sisters, because they don't want to have anything to do with me. But yet I have lots of friends and people that are in my circle that are supportive of me. And that's all I need. As long as I got friends, I'm happy. I could care less if I have a brother or a sister that doesn't want to talk to me anymore. So.
Oh, thank you very much for sharing that. Next, let's go to Angel. Angel?
Identity for me has always been a complicated concept because I'm at the intersection of so many different minorities. And so during a lot of times I grew up in Detroit, and so I like country music, and I have a lot of Caucasian friends, and my family would say, "You're being too white." Like, that's actually a thing. They would say that, and I'm like, that's not a thing. You can't be, I'm not white. I can't be too white because I'm not white. So it doesn't make sense to me. But so when it comes to identity, I think figuring out that I was LGBT, and first of all, figuring out that I was pansexual and not just gay was it was an identity crisis in and of itself. I think, and then trying to figure out how I fit in to an able-bodied world while having a disability, while being LGBT, while being African American, while being a woman, and then having to deal with that all in one while sharing the past of having been sexually abused is I was just full of identity crisis. But I think as time goes on, a lot of therapy, talk therapy, and kind of just being okay to be me, and finding out that people accept me, and not listening to my family. Like she said, I was just trying to. I went home this weekend, and I went back to Detroit this weekend, and my family still thinks that they can tell me what to do, mostly because I can't walk, and I had to inform them that that's not the case. So I think identity is something you have to, like, it comes a lot like when you just decide to be you, regardless of what society says or your parents say or your friends say. You have to decide to be you every single day. And I don't have the luxury of hiding any parts of myself, and neither does anybody, because eventually hiding anything will eat at everybody's soul.
Thank you so much for sharing that. How about Raisin?
All right. What's the question again? The identity and how it all came to be?
The question is, if you could please share your personal experience or story about identity.
Okay. Well, I have intersectionality to deal with too. I'm Black, I'm queer, and I'm autistic. I obviously knew that I was Black first before the other two came along. And for me, that has been really like the defining experience that trumps everything else. But I think it brought a resilience that made it easy for me to be queer and makes it easy for me to tell everybody that I'm autistic. I bring all three everywhere I go. I tell everybody. And I really don't know how to do it any other way. I think the only time I might hide anything is if I feel like I might be in physical danger. But that, thankfully, that's rare. And, as far as people's reactions, good and bad. But, people talked about the importance of just surrounding yourself by your chosen family. And, I have lost biological family over being out. And, it's okay, because the last thing I wanted at my wedding was somebody frowning at me. So it was a happy day.
Okay. That's honest. Thank you very much for sharing. And Andy?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Perfect. Like many people on the conference, on the webinar, I feel the same, you know, and we're all intersectionally sort of connected, which is great. I kind of want to continue the conversation with all the panelists after this webinar. But I feel like coming out as LGBTQ, of course I had my disability first, but I didn't want to be disabled and queer. When I figured out that that's who I was very angry at life, because I figured I had gay friends and they were really shallow. And I'm like, I don't want to be that person. And I don't want to be alone at, you know, my late 20s, early 30s, or even 40s. I was going out to bars and I was like, I don't want to be this person. So, and even now I get told that I dress too feminine and that people assume that I want to transition, but I'm not able, like that I'm too gay for being me, right? And I'm like, or extra. And I always tell people, I created a hashtag that boys can be pretty too, because I am a boy, I consider myself a male, and because I sometimes dress sort of on the feminine side, people assume that I want to transition, and that's not my identity at all. I enjoy being men, I enjoy being a male, and it's okay that I like pretty things, and it's very interesting how people react to that. Like somebody said previously on the webinar, I do carry a purse, and I have nothing wrong with that. I mean, it's a functional tool for me, but it's also part of my identity as an LGBTQ disabled person. And I think that it's still a challenge for today when I roll into a professional setting and they're like, is that a professional person? I'm not sure because he has highlighted hair or what have you. So I think it's still a challenge today of not, I've accepted myself, right? And I have a tribe that accepts me, but in the disability world, in the professional world, I think it's still a challenge for many people to accept us as a visual representation of who we are. And we just sort of have to overcome it on a daily, sometimes hourly basis.
Thank you so much for sharing. So my next question, first, can I get a time check, please?
Yeah, we have about 10 minutes max. So if I might switch to the question and answer portion if that's okay. Are you okay?
Yeah, I was wondering about that. That's why I asked for a time check. Okay, thank you. You want to just go to that? All right, we can go to that.
I'll pull up a couple of resources that our speakers and panelists had shared. So Catherine did share with us the gender unicorn, and at the end of the webinar, when we will send out a recording. We will also send out the links to these resources. Know that it will also be coming. So the gender unicorn that was shared by Catherine, also the Human Rights Campaign. Also, there's some good resources there at Twainbow. And then Max, one of his friends at Green Mountain Self Advocates, put together this vocabulary, what words mean, and that's one we will also, and Catherine read a few of those definitions earlier as well. So we'll get all of those, these links and those resources out to you at the end of the webinar in the coming days. And then one last slide, just a preview before we start question and answer of 2020. We still have a few topics within our Self Advocate series that we are going to address. We don't have dates selected, but things to be looking forward to are some additional webinars on family, children, and parenting, marriage, and sexual self-advocacy. I'm going to put my email in the chat box while we're doing question and answers. If there is a specific question you have or any questions about the webinar today, you are welcome to reach out to me. So I'm going to actually, Tanisha, if you were on, you should hopefully still be here. I will let Tanisha guide us through our question and answer.
All right, so hi, Julie, and I am actually sharing your email right now for any additional questions that might have. I also just shared, oh, it looks like it linked in weirdly, but I also just shared previous webinars in the Sex Talk series, so you'll see those links there. But the questions that we have, well, first someone said thank you all to the panel. Thanks for being real in your conversations. The first question is, can you tell us if there's information somewhere that we can use to determine someone's cognitive ability to consent? If that information is somewhere else or where they can find that.
I can jump in here for a minute, but I think Max said it earlier, presume competence unless otherwise shown. So I think we have to always assume that someone with a disability can consent unless we see some particular reason that we're not sure that they can. There's different assessments and things, but that's, you know, it's a little more about being in sexual relationships than, you know, specifically LGBTQ. But there's probably some similarities where people are giving those messages around, you can't, how do you know you're gay? It's probably just that you're autistic, or so we need to believe people when they speak up. And we can share maybe some other resources. You should look at your consent laws in your state as well. But there's assessments that people use, but assume competence.
Thank you, Catherine. And this, in a sense, is similar to that. What do you think we could teach parents to do differently with their younger kids, like as early as primary school, so that their children can learn to be effective self-advocates for all aspects of themselves as they grow older?
Go ahead, Andy.
Oh, I didn't know if I could speak up or if you needed to do something. I would just say to parents, as your child is developing, acceptance of whatever they decide to present to you. That is the key, I think, to whatever your family dynamic is. If your kid comes to you and says, I may be gay, I may be transgender, I may be feeling these feelings, to not say, no, you're not. To always say, okay, let's talk about it, let's have a conversation, and then do follow-up conversations. Don't ignore it and don't sort of deny it, because it's only going to fester and it's only going to become problematic maybe in the future.
I think the other thing I would say is, too, you wanna make sure that your kid feels comfortable being who they are, regardless if they go get a college degree or if they don't. I have a friend, and they went to college, but because of the trauma that they faced in college with not being taken care of, not having proper physical care, they're not able to use their college degree because of the anxiety that comes with it, and they always feel like less than for not having a job, but they can't have a job mentally. So I think it's one, you have to be able to accept your children, whether they have a disability, and if telling them that they're less than because they can't walk or they can't read or they may be dyslexic and have a wheelchair and sometimes stuff like that. But I think it's dealing with LGBT growing up. You have to just show them, parents love to say you can tell me anything. I encourage parents to mean that when they say it. When parents tell their children all the time, you can tell me anything, no matter what, I'm here for you. I encourage parents to really look at themselves and ask themselves, am I meaning what I say when I say that to my child?
Thank you. Any other thoughts? All right, the next one says, Andy brought up casting directors being overwhelmed by disabilities. How do you help potential partners navigate through layers of a person's intersectionality?
You mean like dating partners?
I would presume so.
Okay, so I within the last 4 years of the whole Tinder and Grindr and all those LGBTQ dating apps that are out there, I made a conscious decision to put my wheelchair front and center, right? All my photos have it, I have a cute little anecdote about being in a wheelchair and being gay. Unicorn on wheels, is how I say it. And I put it up front and center because I want people that could be open to disability to have the visual of it, right? I always had to explain what being in a wheelchair was, right? Because when I would tell people later on after they just saw, a profile of my face or whatever, I said wheelchair and they were thinking, oh my goodness, how do you move? You're paralyzed. Does everything work? And I actually did a YouTube video where I was like, hi, my name's Andy. I'm in a wheelchair. This is what it means. And I put it on my dating profile because I was like, I don't want to re-explain to people what CP is and how my body works. But I do put a photo of my disability within that dating profile so people know, yes, I'm in a wheelchair. And either you're going to accept it or you're not. And honestly, if you're not, or you're not even open to it, I don't even want to have a conversation with you. Like you don't belong in my world. So I think that our ownership of who we are physically, in whatever capacity that is so important. And then to really just be open and honest with our partners about what our body can do and what it can't do. Because I can tell you, when it comes to the intimate parts of my life, my body is different. And somebody needs to be along for that ride. And if they're not, then they're not my match.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think for me, I find that I do that in all aspects of my life. There is 0 point in me hiding my disability when I did it in a job interview. I don't skate by on just like, oh, they don't have to ask about that. They can't ask you about it. I'm like, no, but I can tell them about it. There's no point in hiding it when you have a physical disability. I also find there's no point in hiding it when you don't have a physical disability. If there's something that someone needs to know about you in order to better assist you in being supportive, whether it be to be an employer or whether it be to be a better employee or a better partner or a better kid, a better sister, then you need to tell them what your struggles are so they can help you.
Thank you, Angel. And Andy, Raisin, and Pauline, thank you so much for taking the time to be here with Max, Erica, and Catherine, and to have this conversation today. It's one that's been very important, and we've been looking forward to for quite a while. So thank you.
Yeah, I want to thank all the panelists too for taking the time and getting our answering questions that we had for them. They really had really good answers, which I learned from. So, yeah, I want to thank all of you as well.
Yeah, I did put a link in the chat box for a survey evaluation of today's webinar. We'd love to hear from you about your experience today. And again, a huge thank you to all those who helped participate and make this happen. We will be getting the recording out and those resources. And if you have any questions or questions that were not answered, please feel free to email me, and I would be more than happy to connect with our panelists and speakers to get those questions answered. So thank you for your time and participating in our webinar today.
Do we miss one? Do we miss saying one thank you to another panelist? I thought there were 4 people.
Did I get everyone? I thought I had.
You got it.
Okay.
Right?
Okay. All right.
Thanks for keeping me on my toes, Max.
All righty.
Bye now.
Have a good day.